Hello again. Here we got observational research methods. And again, as I said earlier, I'm a little bit biased. I'm an experimentalist, and experiments allow us to describe, explain, predict, and control. Observational research methods don't allow for that. But they do allow for describing, explaining, predicting, stuff, but not control and not causal. Observational methods do not have random assignment. Okay, we don't manipulate anything. We go out there and just measure stuff. Okay, and these observational methods can be broken down into correlational and descriptive approaches. Okay, and they both have their uses, right? The descriptive approaches is good for describing and explaining. The correlational designs are good for predicting. Okay, and so it turns out observational methods are, how shall we say, cheap? I'm sorry. Cheap, oh, inexpensive, right? Quick, easy to run. Okay, they tend to take much fewer resources and therefore quick. Okay? So some of the observational techniques, breaking it down: naturalistic observation, case studies, archival surveys, questionnaires, interviews. I'll kind of take a look at all of these. Observation is basically going out into the world and observing, just looking at stuff. Okay, but the problem is this is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and that is the very act of observing something changes it. That is all a Heisenberg uncertainty principle says. We can fundamentally never discover the truth of the world because the very act of measuring it and observing it has changed it. And again, there's the Hawthorne effect, right? When people know they're being watched, they act differently than when they don't know they're being watched. So because of this problem, naturalistic observation often has to use unobtrusive observations, or unobtrusive, like participant observation. You want to observe a group of people, you become a member of that group, okay? Or, yeah, there you go. Unobtrusive observations. You'll blend in. The most famous is Jane Goodall, absolutely and utterly irrelevant to IO psychology, but still, Jane Goodall, what she did was, because she wanted to study chimpanzees' natural behaviors, she found when she first went out into the forest in Tanzania, these chimpanzees were reacting to her presence. Okay, so they couldn't get on a real behavior. So Jane Goodall showed incredible patience and sat there for year after year after year until she just became a part of the background. The monkeys no longer responded to her presence because she was just like another tree or something like this. Case studies are potentially useful. Of course, Sigmund Freud, I said it without getting sick. Sigmund Freud was probably the most famous for using case studies. A case study, look at one or a small group of people in huge detail. It's just an observational study of a very small number, and you look at such a huge number. But one of my problem with Freud, all right, I'm just going to leave it at this, is that when you observe a small group of people, you should not generalize that knowledge to the greater whole. Now, this goes back to the Aristotle thing that I said at the beginning. You want to know the truth about what is a dog. You look at 1,000,000 dogs, find the average dog, and that's a dog, right? So if you look at any one dog, God only knows what you're going to find, right? Let's say you pick one dog and it's a Great Dane, all right? And so you study the Great Dane, you do a case study on a Great Dane, and then you go out and say, this is what dogs look like. No, idiot. And that's what happens with a case study. I mean, it is interesting. It allows you to observe in huge detail about one. Archival research is super cheap because you just go in and measure data that's already been gathered. All right. Often the human resources office at the factory you're interested in has all kinds of data about characteristics about employees that they hired, as well as productivity numbers, raises, etc. And so you can just go into the data. Did I not say it's cheap and quick? The data already exists, and all you have to do is go in there and pull it out. Okay? Surveys. Surveys are a form of observational research, but a quick and dirty measure of observational research because I'm going to give you a survey, okay? And basically say, give me a self-report about what you're doing. So I don't have to go out and observe you. It's so cost effective. And we just, there you go. Okay? Give it to you and you tell me, self-report. But surveys in particular, self-administered questionnaires are really a problem because you tend to get what people want to tell you. And I mean, it's a slightly different version of the Hawthorne effect. That is, people give you edited truth. Okay, they don't necessarily, they tell you what they want you to hear. Okay, and so they are useful for what they are. Okay, here's an interesting self-administered questionnaire. I can't hardly see it on mine, but how clever. It's a self-administered questionnaire to establish customer satisfaction. And therefore, you can hopefully figure out which elements of your business are satisfactory to your customer, which aren't, and it would tell you which areas you need to focus on. Surveys nowadays now are able to be done online and makes data collection much easier. Um, I take advantage of this myself, not just using Qualtrics to gather research data, but companies such as Amazon now. Amazon has this funky thing. It's called the Amazon Turk, and what it is individual people, people like you sign up for Amazon Turk, and then people that need to get jobs done, okay, they submit the jobs to Amazon. Amazon then presents these jobs to workers. Workers make decisions about whether or not they would like to take jobs, and then the person administering the work gets their information quickly. It's an amazingly quick way to get work done. But it feels weird for me, a basic experimental researcher, when I'm trying to do my surveys and I'm having to have workers and jobs. We'll talk about ethics, but that sounds really exploitative. Workers and jobs. It's like, but this Amazon Turk really was designed for industry, so that people say, for example, I've heard about people doing web design people that rely heavily on Amazon Turk, and what they'll do essentially is they can really quickly design a website and then whip it up on the Amazon Turk, get some quick feedback from some participants, and find out how effective the web design is. And they can do 5, 10 different designs and find out which web design would be most effective for drawing in traffic or something. It's pretty straightforward. It's a real quick way to get a job done. Okay? And finally, interviews. Interviews are, again, a form of observational learning, oh, wrong class, observational research techniques, but they're intensive. They take a lot of time, but see, what happens is when you get to most surveys or questionnaires, you, the researcher, have designed the questions ahead of time and don't have much ability to change them. So if somebody gives you a very interesting response on question 4, it's just moving on to the preset question 5. But if you're doing an interview in person, if somebody gives you an absolutely unexpected wackadoodle response to question 4, you can follow up on it on the spot. Okay? But we find with all observational studies that you need to make sure that you are getting representative samples. If you don't have representative samples, if the samples that you have, if the people that you are observing do not represent some larger group or population, you have no business making any kind of a generalization. Okay? And so, just like saying, if you do an intense case study on a Great Dane, you ain't got no business talking about other dogs, because Great Danes do not represent the population of all dogs. Okay, so I believe the next thing I'm going to talk about is research ethics or measurement. Well, I don't know. I'll find out in a minute. And you will too.